Today we're continuing the series, Would You Rather at the running back position, coming right up. And what is up, everyone? Welcome to the Gridiron Fantasy Football podcast for Tuesday, August 3rd, 2021. And I'm Chip, I'm your host, and thank you so much for listening today. If you're a new listener, thank you so much for joining us as well. If you'd like to share our podcast, you can find us over on Apple and Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and Amazon Music. If you'd like to watch us, you can watch us over on YouTube at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So please do me a favor, hit subscribe and support the show. And on today's episode, we're going to continue with the series, Would You Rather? And today we're going to start with the running back position. Last week we did quarterback, so now we're going to do the running back. And I'm actually pretty excited about it because this is the week that I fly out to Orlando tonight. Take a red-eye flight back to Orlando, and my draft's on Friday. So if you're a follower of the podcast, you know that last year I went undefeated. I did a perfect 15-0 season, which was crazy to do. Won the championship, and now I get to be able to be celebrated for winning the championship. And I'm really interested to see what the commissioner did for my keeper's trophy for winning the championship. So it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to seeing all the guys and just having some memories with them and just do a fantasy football draft. So with that being said, like I said, let's go into the Would You Rather. So if you watched and listened to the last podcast, I picked about 3 pairs of players that I think are very, guys that you generally you have to pick either or, right? We're always in that position in our drafts that we have to figure out, okay, do I want this guy or this guy? What's the upside of player A compared to player B? And I think that, choosing these guys, I think there's a legitimate case for these guys that I'm going to speak about. So the first pair of players that I have here, I'm going with Ezekiel Elliott versus Austin Ekeler. So right now, Zeke is being ranked at RB6, and Austin Ekeler is at RB7. Last year, Zeke finished 2020 as the RB9, and Ekeler was the RB26, but the problem is Ekeler missed 6 games due to a hamstring injury. And now Zeke was 10th overall in rushing with 979 yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. And Ekeler was 35th with 530 yards and 1 rushing touchdown. The Cowboys' rushing offense overall was 17th, and the Chargers was 18th overall. Now, when it came to the passing game, Zeke had 2 receiving touchdowns and Ekeler had 2. Now, Ekeler had more receptions and yards, and also on the Zeke's part of it, Zeke led the league in inside the 5 carries with 26 compared to Ekeler's 2. So, obviously, Zeke is the guy that's going to get the ball at the goal line. He led last year, so I think that'll still be the case this year. But the problem is he didn't really convert that into a lot of touchdowns. He had a down season. I think once Dak Prescott went out, it was just hard to keep that same offense going. So I do think Zeke does have a bounce-back season. But when it comes to strength of schedule, Zeke has one of the hardest strength of schedules for a running back, and Ekeler has one of the easier ones. So if you look at that, now this is all stats based on last year, so obviously those opponents that these teams play this year could be better when it comes to defense, but overall the Cowboys just have a tougher schedule. So if you look at if I'm looking at Zeke compared to Ekeler and I have to make a choice, obviously this is all compared to redraft leagues and auction leagues. Obviously you can pick any player you want, but if you're stuck between the two, I know that Zeke had a really good offseason this year. I know he shed a lot of weight. He looks pretty much almost like when he was on coming out of college, that he looks motivated. He looks ready to go. But I think I'm going with Ekeler here. If I had to choose, I'm going with Ekeler. I feel like with the Cowboys being such a pass-heavy offense, I still think Zeke is the third or fourth option in that offense behind. You got Gallup, you got Lamb, you got, obviously Cooper. And so I think Zeke, when it comes to opportunities, especially in PPR formats, I think he's the third and fourth option. When it comes to Ekeler, I think he's the second or third option, right, to Justin Herbert. So I think that with Hunter Henry being gone, I think that helps, obviously, Mike Williams, but also I think that bumps up Austin Ekeler when it comes to more targets. Now, when it comes to when Ekeler ran the ball, I know he did miss a lot of games, but it's based on just what I saw from a statistical standpoint. Eckler had better yards per attempt, and he had better yards after contact. So Eckler's game, I think Eckler's around the 4-yard per carry, and then Zeke was around the 3-yard per carry. And he did more after the contact when he got hit. But when I'm talking about who I'm going to choose, like I said, I'm taking Eckler over Zeke. But honestly, I think I'm taking Eckler in PPR formats, and then I'm going to take Zeke in standard formats due to more rushing opportunities. So he's in lead, probably be top in the league in rushing attempts. Now with Dak Prescott being back, Zeke has more scoring opportunities. I think the offense as a whole has more scoring opportunities, but I just do like Austin Eckler this year a lot in PPR formats. I mean, he's a guy I think he has the capability of stop, being a top 5 running back, and you're getting him at a pretty good value. So that's always going to be something you always look at. So with that first pair of players between Zeke and Eckler, I'm going with Eckler. Now we're going to go to my second pair. Now this is the battle of the top 12 running backs in 2020. We got David Montgomery versus Josh Jacobs. So it's crazy how we've seen a drop in Josh Jacobs when it comes to running back position and overall just fantasy value and where people have him ranked. Right now, David Montgomery's ranked ahead of him at 18, and Jacobs at RB 21. Now, David Montgomery finished the season last year as the RB4, and Jacobs was the RB 8. Montgomery was 5th overall in rushing with 1,070 yards and 8 rushing touchdowns, and Jacobs was 8th with 1,065 yards and 12 rushing touchdowns. So pretty close in yards by 5 yards, but Jacobs had a lot more touchdowns. Now, the Bears' rushing offense was 25th overall compared to the Raiders' 14th overall rushing offense. So obviously, the Raiders aren't more opportunity from the rushing the football standpoint. From the wide receiver standpoint, Montgomery had two receiving touchdowns. Jacobs had 2. Now, when it comes to what that means, Montgomery had more receptions and yards, out of the backfield compared to Jacobs. But Jacobs had more red zone and inside the 5 carries and touchdowns than Montgomery. So there's that balance of give and take of who you want to pick. I mean, Montgomery had a massive. Jacobs was pretty consistent throughout the season, but Montgomery got a lot of his fantasy points at the end of the season where he had a really good schedule. But when it comes to strength of schedule this year, Montgomery has, he's probably in the middle of the road when it comes to the strength of schedule. Jacobs has a pretty hard strength of schedule. And so if I had to choose between David Montgomery and Josh Jacobs, I don't believe I'm going to say this, but I'm going to take David Montgomery. I do think that the addition of Kenyon Drake really hurts Josh Jacobs, his ceiling when it comes to just the volume. And I'm not sure, there hasn't been really talks about this, but I'm not sure if Josh Jacobs may get suspended for, his earlier offseason accident. But when they bring in Kenyon Drake, because Kenyon Drake is a very capable running back, and it was odd that someone who has Josh Jacobs will get a running back of Kenyon Drake's caliber. Now I know, it keeps Jacobs fresh, but that just seemed like an odd signing to me. And especially it hurts Jacobs in the passing game. I mean, when I did my podcast last year when it comes to Josh Jacobs, I said, if Josh Jacobs was able to get, 20, 30 more targets and convert that into receptions, he would be a top 10, top 12 running back. And he ended up being that. He got the more targets, but with Kenyon Drake being a really good wide receiver out of the backfield, it just, to me, really hurts Josh Jacobs. And like I said, Josh Jacobs would be more lethal if he was the lone running back. And he's capable of catching the football, but they just don't use him in that way. And I think that really hurts Josh Jacobs' ceiling. But, if Kenyon Drake was not there and Jacobs got more targets, even more than he got last year, I would pick Jacobs without a doubt. But on the flip side of that, Josh Jacobs is not known to like fantasy footballers. So I think that a lot of, I think the mistakes that we make as players, or like fantasy football players, is that we feel like it's necessary to tweet to a player or reach out on social media about their performance, and I think that's obviously the worst thing to do. These are things that we, as analysts or as fantasy football players, we do everything based on probability, and you can't get mad at a guy who doesn't get the rushing attempts or gets the stats. I mean, it's just a game. It's fun, and I think some of the players do embrace it, and there's some players out there who just really don't care about it. So I think if Josh Jacobs is like, hey, dinged up just a tad bit and he wants to sit, he's probably like, you know what, I'd rather be healthy than get further injured. And I think that really, I like having players on my team that enjoy the fantasy football and they embrace it because it's part of the NFL. But there is a line that players do cross, like the fantasy football players, that shouldn't be crossed because you can't predict and you can't be mad at players for not performing. So it's all about probability and luck and whatnot. So anyways, but I'm going to go with David Montgomery in that decision. Now, lastly, this is going to be the rookie darling of this year versus the rookie darling of last year. So I got Najee Harris versus Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So right now, Harris is being ranked at RB13, and that probably will continue to go up as we see more of them in the preseason. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is RB14. Now, obviously, there's no stats on Harris because he was a rookie last year coming out of Alabama. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was RB22. He only played 13 games and whatnot. And also, when it came to his stats, he was 17th with 803 yards and 4 rushing touchdowns. When it comes to the Steelers now, when it comes to like their rushing offense, they were dead last at 32 overall. So that's a little concerning when it comes to Harris's upside. Now, the Chiefs were 17th overall in rushing, so obviously a lot better than the Steelers. When it comes to receiving touchdowns, Clyde Edwards-Helaire had 1. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire, he did have 54 receptions for 297 yards, so not bad coming out of the backfield. But the only downside to Clyde Edwards-Helaire is that he only scored 1 touchdown from inside the 5 and just a really bad conversion rate. I think he had like 9 attempts, he only scored once. So I think that was a big concern. Like if he had a few more touchdowns in the end zone and inside the 5 and got into the end zone, I think different story. But I do think that, when it comes to strength of schedule, they both have really good strength of schedule, so that's not something that I'm concerned about. So if I had to look at the stats from last year and trying to predict on how Harris will be this year, the Steelers are known to have really good running backs. James Conner, did well once Le'Veon Bell moved on and didn't play for that one season, and so I think like the Steelers are known to produce good running backs, and I think that if I had to choose between Harris and Clyde Edwards-Helaire this year, I'm going to go with the rookie. I'm going to go with Najee Harris because there's generally no competition, and he's going to be the workhorse. He's a really good wide receiver out of the backfield. He's big. He's physical. So I think that he's almost like a newer Le'Veon Bell in the sense of just having that capability of being a fantasy stud. So I'm looking forward to seeing what Harris does. And I think obviously with Le'Veon Bell, like talking about Clyde Edwards-Helaire now, with Le'Veon Bell no longer being in Kansas City, I think that helps. But honestly, like they still use Darrell Williams and they signed Jerick McKinnon, so they got three running backs that are going to probably go in and cycle through, and I just don't see the upside for Clyde Edwards-Helaire being there. I think he could be a breakout fantasy player because of just now being in his second year. I think that they'll learn how to use him more. Patrick Mahomes, handpicked Clyde Edwards-Helaire, so I think that there's obviously opportunity there. But I think when it comes to who I'd rather have, I definitely would go with Najee Harris over Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So those are my picks. So I hope this helps. So when it comes to Zeke and Austin Eckler, I'm going with Austin Eckler. David Montgomery versus Josh Jacobs, I'm going with David Montgomery. And then with Najee Harris versus Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I am going with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So that's it for today. I hope that you guys enjoyed the episode. I'll be back next week when I'm going to go and do the would you rather for the wide receiver position. But, thank you for listening. Please like, comment, and share. And hit subscribe if you haven't already, and hit the bell so you don't miss any more episodes. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Facebook and Twitter at the Gridiron Pod, and on Instagram at Gridiron Fantasy Football. So have a great day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.